Good afternoon, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. My guest is Dr. Scott Lively. Scott was a candidate for governor of my own home state of Massachusetts a while back. He is the co-author of The Pink Swastika. He's a minister out of Springfield many a while back. And Scott, you're starting now getting involved in a YouTube channel, and you're beginning to talk about kind of an international movement, which interests me. Talk a bit about that. What is going on with your vision of a Bible-based international movement that brings people together of like mind?
Well, I've been fighting the culture war for 30 years, and most of that time I've been on the front lines, and I've been to 63 countries, written a number of books. Have my entire life, adult life, has been focused on this goal. And what I see, the greatest failure has been that we have not unified the people of the world on the basics of universal values, the natural law perspective, as the broadest as our broadest base, and that's especially evident in Christianity, where we're divided into all these very diverse and often conflicted factions. And I want to pursue sort of post-denominational unity on the essentials of the faith, and work together to stand against the sort of the humanist juggernaut that's stripping us of our of what the founding fathers established for us here in the United States.
Okay, so how would you define natural law, and what are some of these basic fundamental principles that we can find unity on, even if we may disagree with each other on various sectarian questions and specifics? Where can we find unity? What is the natural law as you define it?
Well, for me, it comes down to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, that's the most truth that we share with the vast majority of the people of the earth. Now, maybe not American citizens who have all been conditioned according to a materialistic, humanistic worldview, but around the world, anyone who hasn't been trained in something different recognizes, even as a child, the basics of the created order. You know, that we're designed as male and female. Families are formed naturally. Communities are formed naturally by families. Those things are universals, and yet we don't really emphasize those at all when we're dealing with public policy.
So then, what I gather here is that you're saying that the biblical admonition, which exists, as you point out in Genesis 1:1, is that God, as opposed to man, created the universe. God is the creator. God is the king of the universe. And God, thus, is an extension of the Bible, is the lawgiver. It's the origin of as the Greeks say, logos or nomos of the universe. And that it is a balance between a belief in the creator of the universe and an understanding or an attempt to perceive the nature of God's laws that creates natural law, that creates a moral society.
Yeah, well, if you look at the issues that we are having the greatest challenge with, especially in the Western world, they all come down to the definition of what it means to be a human being, right? How we're supposed to act in terms of the most basic of human behaviors, sexuality, and family relationships, and that even though the vast majority of the people of the world all agree on that we are the creation of God and that there is a natural order to things, our majority opinion doesn't seem to matter at all, and we don't really try to assert it or defend it. We are, but if we did, if here in the United States, if we reached out to all the people who share that worldview, then we would outnumber those who are trying to to change society. But instead, the globalists have us sort of polarized in these warring camps over uh, important things or important issues, but they're not the foundational issues that we could if we had unity on those basic things. Most of the social problems that we're fighting about or that we're concerned about would really be solved.
I mean, your comments bring up a lot of thoughts for me. I mean, to discuss a current issue, you talk about the globalists dividing us up by creating false differences, and I think that's what they're trying to do now in this country and in much of the rest of the world, in response to what I see as a natural movement and as a reassertion of the values you're talking about and of individual sovereignty under God. And that is euphemistically called a nationalist movement or a populist movement. And in this country, I would argue that that is represented by the election of Donald Trump, and that the globalists are trying to divide us with artificial conflicts, like that they want us to get into, or they want to label us as having something against people based on race and whatnot. When these are lies, I mean, it's really an attempt to weaken this emerging movement, which is it includes all in the case of the United States, it includes all Americans. The idea of reasserting our national sovereignty, of putting our own lives first and our own destinies, and being able to determine the nature of that based upon an understanding of what is right. And I will also mention something very specific that I find interesting in terms of this, and that is that about maybe several months ago, I attended an event at my synagogue here in Boston, which included a talk by a very notorious gay rabbi, Rabbi Greenberg. He's written a book. He's out there, and a lot of the people who came to hear him speak were gay or were advocates of gay rights and who were expecting like him to come up and give a fiery speech about the virtues of being gay, when in fact he did not do that. And that's why I don't think he's been heard from since. What he said was that, putting aside the question of whether or not a person has a right to be gay, the fact is that homosexual activity is not a virtue, and the Torah does not view it as holy. Wow. In fact, it views it as, I was quite astonished. It's seen as a fall from holiness. That doesn't mean you can't, you have to ban it, but you can't condone it. And it's not something that, and in a sense, the Torah says that, it uses the word toavi, which is, it's been misinterpreted in the New Testament to be an abomination. That's not the Hebrew meaning. The Hebrew meaning is unholy. It's a fall away from proper holy conduct. And he was saying, look, I'm not here to say you can't have this and you can't engage in it, but I'm here to point out that let's not pretend that this is something that it brings us closer to God. It brings us away from God. It's your choice.
That's quite.
I mean, I was, and the audience looked absolutely crestfallen. Oh my God! I mean, people were like, they were shocked, and and as I said, he has not been heard from since. This is about a year ago, actually, when I heard him speak on Shavuos, and to me, that's and I recently was watching Milo Yiannopoulos, who is an openly gay conservative talk show host on YouTube. Yeah. And he was talking about this guy who is part of Turning Point USA, which is, presenting itself as conservative, but it includes a open homosexual as part of their presentation. And he said the same thing. He said, look, I'm not going to deny that I'm gay, but I'm not going to pretend that this is something that's a virtue. It's just part of what I'm doing, but it's part of what I'm about, but it's not something that I'm going to tout up on the flagpole and say, this is great. This is it's not great. But I mean, I recognize people have a right to it. But let's not, as a society, pretend that this is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's hope for people who acknowledge that what they're doing is sin, right? The real
Right.
problem comes when you declare that God is and you're right, and that you're going to continue to do something because you're the one who's right and not him. That's where you really run into problems, theologically, spiritually.
Well, that's where you end up. That's what the satanic.
I recognize that people struggle with sexual inclinations. I call it same-sex attraction disorder, right? I've adopted. And I think that's what it is. It's same-sex attraction disorder. And if you acknowledge that it's a disorder, even if you struggle with it, then at least you're being that there's even room. As a Christian, I believe that you can be a Christian and struggle with behavior that's beyond your ability to control at the moment, as long as you acknowledge that it's not what God wants for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a right. Part of freedom is the right to sin, but yet let's not pretend that sin is a virtue. We should identify it as such, and if we choose it, then we do so at our own personal and spiritual risk, and let's not advocate it. Let's try to reduce it. So, to me, this is a movement. What you're talking about, I think, is a movement that is even entering into some of the
kind of breaking up a little bit on my end. I'm going to try
a little bit there. All right, Scott, no problem.
I'm going to switch my okay. I'm going to tether my computer to my phone.
All right, very good.
See if that helps any. I don't know if it's you or if it's me, but.
No, I think it is coming from your end. Because I did an interview earlier and there was no problem. So let's see if that's an improvement. Say something now. Let's see how it goes.
Switch.
Okay.
All right. Now it should be. I have a stronger signal through my phone than I.
It's a little bit better. But I would suggest that you work on it. When I started doing the show, I had to get an upgrade on my laptop, and I got like an external mic and an external webcam. So not a big investment, but I wanted to improve my audio. And some of my earlier shows, I got a lot of complaints, rightfully, because it was not good. But anyhow, so you are, as a YouTube host, you're spearheading an effort to bring people together who understand these concepts. We started by talking about the most basic of all, which is that God created the universe, not man.
The connection.
Are you there? All right. We're having some technical problems here.
Scott. No, I actually thought it switched over to the other connection, and it didn't. So let me close.
No, this is better. This is better. You're sounding better now, I think. Or maybe not.
Okay, here we go. Now, this one should be better. This should be better right now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I thought I had disconnected from the router, but I hadn't. Anyway, Go ahead and ask what's your point
anyway, so we started by talking about the most basic and fundamental element of the Bible, of the Torah, that we agree on, which is that the Lord God, King of the universe, created the world and created the law, created order, created, logos, as my good friend Dr. E. Michael Jones calls it in his new book, Rising Logos, which is a brilliant mind. I totally disagree with him on his view on Jews, but putting that aside, but yes, Logos is all about the creation of the universe, the creation of order of the universe. This is what I would argue Judaism and Christianity share in terms of an understanding of God's order and of trying to measure our lives to that, live by that as best we can. Well, we also recognize and identify sin because that is the satanic influence. And while we recognize that people are going to sin, we all are, and that people have a right to it to an extent that doesn't hurt anyone, let's not come out and give it the good housekeeping seal of approval.